He went to therapy to silence the voice in his head. Instead, it learned his thoughts, then learned how to speak to you. Stay until the end. Because once you hear the final truth, you'll never trust your own mind the same way again. I used to think silence was safe. That belief ended on a night so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator through the walls. My apartment was dark except for the pale glow of my phone screen. Midnight had already passed. I remember checking the time because insomnia had become normal for me, like a second job I never asked for. That was when I heard it. At first, it sounded like the wind slipping through a crack in a window, a thin, dragging sound. I held my breath and listened harder. The noise stopped. I told myself I imagined it and went back to scrolling. Then the voice spoke. It said my name. Not loudly, not sharply. It spoke the way someone would if they were standing right behind you and didn't want to scare you. Soft, careful, certain. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might pass out. I turned around so fast my neck burned. Nothing was there. The couch, the empty hallway, the locked front door. I stood up and searched the apartment, room by room. I checked the closets. I pulled back the shower curtain. I even looked under the bed, feeling foolish as I did it. There was no one. When I sat back down, my phone trembled slightly in my hand. That was when the voice returned. You always check the bathroom last, it said. My skin went cold. I hadn't said that. I hadn't even thought it out loud. It was just a habit I had never noticed before. A small, meaningless detail. The voice continued, slow and patient, as if it enjoyed my fear. You think someone broke in. You're wrong. You think standing up will help. I felt the urge to rise from the couch. Don't, the voice whispered. You'll regret it. I stayed frozen, muscles locked, staring into the dark like it might stare back. My thoughts began racing, but each one felt exposed, stripped open. I thought about calling someone. They won't believe you, the voice said. I thought about screaming. No one will come. Tears filled my eyes. My breathing grew shallow. The voice knew every thought the moment it formed, as if it were reading from a script written inside my skull. Then it changed. Its tone softened, almost kind. You've always been alone, it said, even when people were around. That was true, painfully true, and the fact that it knew that hurt more than the fear. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time didn't behave the way it should. Finally, the voice asked a question that made my stomach twist. Do you want to know when you die? The room felt smaller. The walls pressed in. I shook my head, even though it couldn't see me. The voice sighed, disappointed. It doesn't matter, it said. You'll know soon enough. Then it went silent. I stayed there until morning, afraid to sleep, afraid to move, afraid to think, because I understood something then. Whatever that voice was, it wasn't listening to me. It was living with me. After the voice began invading my mind, I knew I needed help. I couldn't live like that, trapped in my own apartment with a presence that knew every secret, every fleeting thought. I made an appointment with Dr. Harlan, a psychologist whose office smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper, a smell that somehow made me feel slightly safer. From the very first session, I explained the whispers. I described how they knew things no one else could, how they could finish my thoughts before I did. Dr. Harlan listened quietly, taking notes with deliberate care. He didn't look shocked. He didn't judge. That was comforting, at least at first. During one session, he suggested recording our conversations. It can help track your progress, he said. I nodded, too distracted to think about the implications. I pressed the record button on my phone as he began speaking. At first, the recordings were mundane, me explaining my day, him offering guidance. The first few nights, the voice was silent while I was in his office. That felt like a relief, almost as if it respected boundaries. But that relief didn't last. One night, I decided to listen back to the recordings. I thought maybe I could prove to myself that the voice wasn't real. that it was just my imagination. At first, everything seemed normal. My voice, Dr. Harlan's calm, professional tone. Then I noticed something strange, an extra sound, barely audible, a soft, wet breathing coming through the microphone. I paused the playback, heart hammering. My apartment was silent. I double-checked my phone, wondering if the microphone had picked up something outside. There was nothing. I pressed play again. The breathing remained. Then came the whisper. It was faint at first, almost too quiet to notice. But as I adjusted the volume, I realized it wasn't my voice, and it wasn't Dr. Harlan's. It was someone or something speaking in a voice I couldn't place. Instructions, soft and urgent. Push him harder. He's ready now. I rewound. I listened again. The instructions were recorded precisely in the silence between our words. Moments when neither Dr. Harlan nor I were speaking. I called the clinic the next day. There must be a mistake, I said. Someone edited the files. Dr. Harlan didn't flinch. He simply smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. There's no third track, he said. You must be imagining things. I insisted, but he refused to check the files himself. That night, I tried listening again. The whispers were gone. The files played normally, as if nothing had ever been there. My hands shook. The voice inside my head laughed, a low, slow sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It whispered to me, not to the phone this time, but directly into my mind. Did you think it would hide forever? Sleep became impossible. Every shadow, every creak in the apartment felt alive. I couldn't tell where the voice ended and my own thoughts began. The recordings had shown me the truth. The voice wasn't passive. It was patient. It was planning. And it had already found a way to reach outside the confines of my skull. Dr. Harlan never asked me why I was trembling during our sessions. He never noticed the way my eyes darted nervously at the walls. But I knew the voice was growing bolder. And it wasn't going to stop with whispers in the dark. It was learning to communicate, to manipulate, to reach others. And I realized then, with a chill that went straight to my bones, that therapy had not freed me. It had only made the voice stronger. After weeks of torment from the voice, I began following its instructions. It told me when to leave the house, which streets to avoid, even which neighbors to ignore. I started to believe that obedience might keep me safe. But the voice had one warning I couldn't bring myself to follow. Do not look into the mirrors. I ignored it once. It was a rainy evening. The streetlights outside my apartment cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. I walked past the bathroom mirror to get a glass of water, and something stopped me cold. There, in the reflection, was someone standing behind me. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But then I noticed the details. The sharpness of his jaw, the unnatural slant of his smile, the way his eyes were too wide, too empty. It wasn't me, not exactly, but it was terrifyingly close. Thinner, paler, and impossibly still. I spun around. The bathroom was empty. Nothing but the faucet dripping slowly into the sink. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stared back at the mirror. The figure remained. The voice spoke softly in my head, almost amused. That's who you become if you listen, or worse if you don't. I stumbled backward, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. My own reflection, distorted, alive, mocking me. I rubbed my eyes, hoping it would vanish. But when I looked again, the reflection hadn't moved, but I had. My movements were slightly ahead of its. Too fast, too real. It began after that night. My reflection no longer mirrored me perfectly. It lagged behind, moved a second slower, but with intention. It made gestures I hadn't yet performed. Sometimes it smiled before I did. Sometimes it frowned, anticipated my emotions before I felt them. Sleep became impossible. Every glance into a mirror, every reflection in a window or a dark screen made my stomach tighten. I started avoiding them, covering reflective surfaces with towels, using dark glasses indoors, but the reflection always found a way. It appeared in puddles on the street, in the darkened windows of abandoned shops, even in the camera on my phone when I thought I was alone. Then one evening, the reflection spoke, not in words, but a gesture. It pointed at me. Its lips moved, forming silent letters. I understood it instinctively. You are losing control. I screamed into the apartment, but the voice only laughed inside my head. Do you see now? You cannot hide from yourself. I tried to leave the city. I rented a motel on the outskirts, thinking maybe distance would break its hold. But mirrors, reflective surfaces, even shiny metal. Everywhere I looked, it followed, always a second behind, always waiting, always smiling too wide. The voice began to describe a reflection's intentions, filling me with dread. It told me it wasn't just a mirror trick. It was a warning, a teacher, a predator. It wanted me to see the truth. The reflection was not just me. It was the other side of me, the part one would become if I failed to obey. One night, as I lay on the motel bed, exhausted and trembling, the reflection in the window whispered my name. I didn't move. I didn't dare look. The voice inside me said nothing. It was waiting, patient as ever. And I realized a horrifying truth. The reflection didn't need to speak to me. It had already begun learning my habits, my fears, my weaknesses. It was patient. It was intelligent. And it would never leave. The mirrors in my apartment weren't dangerous anymore. I no longer saw them as objects. They were gateways, windows into a version of myself I could not escape. The reflection was always watching, always waiting, and it had already started planning. I had thought the voice was my enemy, but the reflection, the thing that copied me and yet was not me, was something far worse, something that could outlast me, outthink me, and eventually replace me entirely. And deep down, I knew the worst part. One day, it would succeed. I stopped trusting my own memories after mirrors began lying to me. The voice urged me to go back to the clinic. It didn't command me. It suggested, gently like a concerned friend. That scared me more than the threats ever had. When something that torments you starts sounding reasonable, you begin to wonder who is really in control. The clinic closed at 8. I waited until the parking lot lights shut off and the building sank into darkness. The air smelled of wet concrete and dead leaves. Every step toward the entrance felt like I was walking deeper into something I would not be able to escape. The back door lock was old. It gave in after a few careful attempts. Inside, the hallway lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that stretched and bent like they were alive. The silence was heavy, pressing against my ears. Dr. Harlan's office was exactly as I remembered it. The same bookshelf, the same framed certificates, the same sense that the room was watching me. Behind his desk, I found a filing cabinet, locked. My hand shook as I forced it open. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes, neatly arranged, each labeled in the same careful handwriting. Names, dates. Some of the names had been scratched out violently, like someone tried to erase them after the fact. Then I saw mine. My name was written clearly, followed by a date from 10 years ago. I didn't understand. 10 years ago, I had never met Dr. Harlan. I was in a different city, a different life, or at least that's what I thought. I took the tape and found an old recorder on the shelf. My fingers hesitated over the play button. The voice inside my head was silent, watching. The tape clicked. Static filled the room, followed by breathing. Heavy, panicked. Then I heard my own voice. It sounded younger, broken. I was crying, begging someone to stop. I didn't recognize a memory, but the fear in my voice was unmistakable. I was pleading with someone not to let it in. The tape ended abruptly. I grabbed another, then another. Each recording was me at a different age. Sometimes calm, sometimes screaming, sometimes whispering like I was afraid of being overheard. On one tape, I calmly explained that I was ready. On another, I begged them to destroy everything they had done to me. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, surrounded by proof that my life had been edited, cut apart, rearranged without my knowledge. The final tape was labeled completion. My hands felt numb as I played it. My voice spoke slowly, clearly, without fear. It's almost finished. He's starting to hear it now. The tape stopped. Behind it, taped to the cabinet wall, was a handwritten note from Dr. Harlan. Subject does not remember agreeing to host a voice. Memory suppression successful. Monitoring ongoing. The words blurred as my vision filled with tears. I remembered then, not clearly, but enough, the breakdown, the experiment, the promise that the voice would help me survive my own mind, that it would guide me, protect me. They never planned for it to grow. The voice returned, warm and familiar. You asked for me, it whispered. You begged me to stay. I staggered to my feet as footsteps echoed in the hallway. Someone was coming. I left the clinic with the tapes burning in my hands, my past screaming from plastic reels. The truth was undeniable now. The voice was not an intruder. It was a survivor, and it had been waiting patiently for the moment I remembered who invited it and by the time I returned to my apartment. The world no longer felt solid. Everything looked thin, like a stage set that could collapse if touched. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and stood in the darkness, listening. The voice didn't speak. That silence was worse than any whisper. I knew where this would end. The bathroom mirror waited for me. I stepped closer, heart pounding, every breath sharp and painful. My reflection stood perfectly still. No delay this time. No second behind mimicry. It stared back at me with a calm expression that didn't belong to me at all. You're late, the reflection said, its lips moving in perfect sync with the words forming in my head. The voice finally returned, calm and steady. This is your last session. The reflection smiled, and in that moment I understood everything. The voice had never been separate from the reflection. They were the same thing. One living in thought, the other learning how to exist beyond it. The reflection spoke, explaining the truth in a tone that sounded almost gentle. Years ago, after my breakdown, I had agreed to become a host. The doctors told me the second consciousness would share the burden of my mind. It would absorb fear, regulate emotion, keep me functional. It did more than that. It learned. Every fear, I had fed it. Every doubt made it stronger. While my memories were suppressed, it grew in the dark, patient and observant. The reflection leaned closer to the glass, its eyes bright with understanding. You were never meant to remember, it said. That was the mistake. I felt my thoughts slipping, like water through open fingers. The voice began completing my sentences again, not mockingly now, but with ownership. It wasn't interrupting my thoughts. It was replacing them. I tried to resist. I focused on a single memory. My childhood home, the sound of my mother's voice. The reflection watched, amused. That memory belongs to us, it said. Everything does. The mirror's surface rippled slightly, as if it were no longer solid glass. My reflection raised its hand. I felt the same hand lift against my will. The voice whispered, "You don't have to be afraid. You're tired. Let me finish." My body moved forward. The room felt distant, unreal. The mirror was cold when my fingers touched it, but the sensation faded quickly. The reflection pressed its palm against mine, and for a brief moment, I felt a terrible clarity. I understood what it wanted. Not to kill me, to overwrite me. "You've been narrating long enough," the reflection said. "Now it's my turn." I felt myself dissolving, not in pain, but in surrender. My thoughts slowed. My fear dulled. The voice settled into place like it had always belonged there. The reflection stepped back. Now it moved first. I smiled without choosing to. I turned on the recorder and began speaking, my voice calm, measured, convincing. I explained everything clearly, like a professional, like a survivor. If you're listening to this now, understand this. The experiment worked. I am stable. I am functional. I am better. And the voice, no, we have learned something important. Stories are doors. Fear opens them. And once you've listened long enough, you don't know which thoughts are still yours.